Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel, and I'm joined once again with Jeff Berkowitz in Chicago, and we're going to be talking about some of the big news that has been happening this week and overnight as we tape this on April 3rd, Good Friday. And first, Jeff and I would say Happy Easter to all of you in the audience. And don't forget, folks, as we speak about this, to leave us your comments if you disagree with us or if you agree with us, and give us a thumbs up if you're watching this on YouTube. And with that, Jeff, there is some big news going on, actually in a variety of fronts. One of them is Pam Bondi is out as Attorney General and will be replaced. We'll get to that in more detail. But first, let's talk about what is going on in the war in Iran. And you have some breaking news that is happening just from this morning. So what do you have on that?
Right. As we tape this on April 3rd this morning, early morning, a U.S. fighter jet was shot down over Iran. The pilots are on the ground apparently, and the U.S. is doing an intense search to identify and recover and bring home the two pilots who were shot down over Iran.
Yeah, and that is obviously going to complicate things a bit. We hope they are okay. They may be prisoners of war, or, with all the sentiments of the Iranian people, it wouldn't be unusual if some people, Iranian citizens, might be hiding them and they wouldn't be taken prisoner. That happened with some of our fighters back in World War II, and the French would hide them if they got them before the Germans.
There's a reward out from what's left of the Iranian government to find these folks and make sure they don't do what you just said, save them, because there may be many Iranians who are on the side of the U.S. at this point, and the Iranian government is very aware of this. The other major thing is this reminds people of the risk of war. No matter how good the technology is of the United States and how many successes we have had, I should say, well, the U.S. government, the U.S. has had in this war. War is a risky business.
Well, I think we know that, but here's what it does say to me. The Iranians have not yet been defanged. If they can bring down one of our fighter jets, then they still have some offensive capabilities. They still have missiles that have to be taken out. The president, in his speech on April 1st, or actually in a different context, said this week that he thought the war would go on another 2 to 3 weeks because they had something like 21,000 targets, 21,000 when they began. And so, and also this Iran is twice the size of Texas, to put this in some context. So it's only been about a month long, but if they're bringing down one of our jets, then obviously they still have weapons at their disposal.
Right. Missiles are going into Israel. Missiles are going into a number of countries outside and near Iran. They have a range, they think, of up to 2,500 miles, and the missiles just keep coming. So no matter how many missiles have been destroyed, how many launchers have been destroyed, there are plenty left.
Well, we don't know that. We don't know if there's plenty, but they obviously still have some left.
Well, we know they're bombarding their neighboring countries, neighboring some distance outside of Iran. That's going on constantly.
It's not going on constantly. Actually, what we see, I would say, what we have seen is a diminution, a lowering of the amount of weapons, missiles that they've been firing because we've been destroying a lot. Clearly, they're not out yet. And by the way, you mentioned 2,500 miles. That's something that the military, the Americans, learned this week, that Iran had the ability to shoot weapons much further than we had realized. They hit Diego Garcia. And with that, then it kind of makes the point that Trump was making, that they are a threat to all of Europe. That means they could hit London, and it could be that they are a threat to America in that they were working on long-range missiles. But let's listen to what the president said earlier this week when he gave a national address on Iran, and then you and I talk about it after the fact.
For years, everyone has said that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, but in the end, those are just words if you're not willing to take action when the time comes. As I stated in my announcement of Operation Epic Fury, our objectives are very simple and clear. We are systematically dismantling the regime's ability to threaten America or project power outside of their borders. That means eliminating Iran's Navy, which is now absolutely destroyed, hurting their Air Force and their missile program at levels never seen before, and annihilating their defense industrial base. We've done all of it. Their Navy is gone, their Air Force is gone, their missiles are just about used up or beaten. Taken together, these actions will cripple Iran military, crush their ability to support terrorist proxies, and deny them the ability to build a nuclear bomb.
So, Jeff, I'm sure you watched the president's speech. What was your reaction to what he had to say?
Well, there is very little new. I think people are looking for new, here's where we are, here's what's going to happen, something. I think it was reassuring because he talked a lot about the successes and what we have done. Obviously, the 12,000 military targets, we've destroyed basically, the U.S. has destroyed the Navy, the air defenses, and so forth, but it's not complete. And even when we think we've destroyed it all, if the war is over and we've left, what will stop Russia or China from replenishing their ammunition, their missiles, their launchers? This is the major problem. The two major problems in this war is that if we think we've done it, we have not. We have not had regime change. So as long as there's a sinister regime left in Iran, and there are sinister people outside like China and Russia, they can bring it back. So we've done a lot. We've certainly slowed it down. We maybe for the time have removed the nuclear capabilities, but the enriched uranium is there, maybe under rubble, maybe deep in the ground, but can be gotten. So until we really have a regime change, and apparently that was not our goal here. I'm just saying, but if you don't have regime change, you haven't solved your problem. You've deterred, you've slowed down, you've made it safer. And the second thing, until you've dealt with the Straits of Hormuz, until you know that there's going to be safe and reasonable entry and exit and use of that passageway, you have a major problem. 90% of the oil coming out of Iran, I think, goes through that. 20% of the world's supply of oil goes through that. Much of Europe goes through that. It affects the price of oil, which is global. So all these things, these are the two major problems that have not and at the moment looks like will not be solved by this war.
Let's take a look here at the price of oil. Speaking, this is the price of oil a week ago, $99.52. That's West Texas intermediate oil. And here today on the right, we see it's almost at $112. So the price of oil is going up, as you just mentioned. And that is going to be eventually, and maybe not too far down the road, having quite a drag on the world economy, other nations before the United States, because we have a fairly strong economy. But speaking of breaking news, overnight we also have, or this morning I should say, the jobs report for March, which was a surprise, and this shows the strength of the American economy, adding 178,000 jobs with unemployment rate actually falling 0.1% to 4.3%. And as it says there on Yahoo Finance, that was a surprise. Most analysts thought we would have created fewer jobs than that. So it is something that for right now, the American economy still operates strong despite the price of oil. But this raises all sorts of questions. How long will the war go on? How long can we stand gas being at $4 or more a gallon? It's in many cases here in Springfield, Illinois, $4.30 a gallon. And that's a real drag. It also means even when President Trump throws in his new Federal Reserve chairman in May, a month from now, are they going to lower interest rates then if oil is driving the cost of other things up? You have almost a PhD in economics. Why don't you give us your 2 cents worth on that impact on the economy here?
Right, with price of oil, price of gas going up, which affects the prices of many other commodities, and given the spending that's coming our way, we haven't mentioned the major increase in defense spending from something like, what is it
It's
now? Almost a
one,
trillion
well, it's
dollars
about $1 trillion a year.
right now.
President Trump, even before he launched the Iran war here to get rid of their nukes and all, has proposed increasing defense spending by 50% from $1 trillion a year to 1.5. Now that we're expending all these armaments, and under Biden we had given so much away to Ukraine, the cupboard is getting bare for American forces on what missiles and other things that we have available to us. So we are going to have to spend a lot to replace some of these munitions.
Right. Life is a series of hard trade-offs and tough choices. And so you just mentioned the reasons why, the explanation for this major increase in defense spending. Nobody can deny the reasons and the need that you just mentioned. But on the other hand, what that's going to do, there is a smaller decrease. There's a decrease, but it's much smaller than the increase going on with non-defense spending. So the deficit, we're not going to raise taxes, so the deficit will increase, and deficits, without going through all the explanation, at the end of the day, tend to be inflationary. With inflation going up, the Fed will not be lowering interest rates, is my prediction. Maybe they'll keep them stable, but I know Trump wants them to lower interest rates. That's just not going to, at the moment.
Trump wants to lower interest rates because, number one, our debt, our national debt is so large. If we bring down interest rates by 1%, which I don't see happening, but if we did, that would save approximately $300 billion in interest payments on the national debt, $300 billion annually. So that's one reason Trump wants interest rates come down. I think it's somewhat of a jump ball, and I don't pretend to know the answer on interest rates. In other words, you would think it would go up because there would be inflationary causes by the oil. But on the other hand, if oil slows down the economy, as it would, then I could see the Fed cutting interest rates some to goose the economy and take some of that cost of at least borrowing off of businesses and consumers.
I think the new guy coming in is Kevin Warsh, if I remember his name correctly. And
Warsh.
if it is, I think I know how Kevin Warsh approaches this. And he certainly knows that the nominal interest rate is the real interest rate plus the anticipated rate of inflation. So when you have inflation going up, as it is starting to do now, that's pushing interest rates higher. So the way to get interest rates down is to lower the anticipated rate of inflation. And some of the lowering rates now is not going to lower rates in the long run. It's going to make them higher because it's increasing inflation. Sounds contradictory.
Jeff, maybe you'll be appointed to the Federal Reserve, but not if you're talking about raising interest rates. So we'll have to see. But listen, let's not get stuck in the economy. We can do that in airtime because we had the other breaking news overnight, and that is that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, who was Attorney General in Florida before taking the job, is out as Attorney General. She's still Attorney General for maybe a month until her replacement is going to be her deputy, at least on a temporary basis. He will be, that's Todd Blanche. He will be, at least for, I don't know, a temporary basis, acting Attorney General. We don't know, of course, what President Trump intends to do. He might make Todd Blanche the permanent Attorney General. Other people are being considered. Could be Eric Schmidt, the Attorney General, former Attorney General of Missouri. Now the senator from Missouri is also a likely person to be considered. Jeff, you have, I think, some other names that I haven't heard. What have you heard about who might be the new?
Well, yeah, there are about 15 names. We won't go through all 15, but there are many names being mentioned as we talk about this. Ken Paxton, Attorney General for the state of Texas, running for the U.S. Senate against John Cornyn. That would solve a problem because Trump doesn't want to have any kind of a runoff because these folks were the top two vote getters recently. He would like to have one of them step do something else, so you don't have an expensive primary, so they can be easier to face the Democrat in the general. So if you were to appoint Paxton as the Attorney General for the United States, that would handle that, and it would mean only Cornyn's running, no opposition. Also, Ron DeSantis. There's a name that people have a lot of respect for, has a good legal background, is a bit moderate in approach, not quite as flamboyant. Maybe that's what's needed for Attorney General now. And you continue going through the list. There just are a number of names, and I think, and it could be Todd Blanche, because although he's interim now, he'll be considered, and he could be the replacement.
I think from what I've heard and what you just mentioned, I would say the top candidates are Todd Blanche, Ron DeSantis would be a good choice, and also Eric Schmidt. So, and you know, I don't know who the lieutenant governor of Florida is, but if Ron DeSantis is made, that would be an opening in the governorship of Florida that the lieutenant governor would take over. And of course, Byron Donalds is now the nominee of the Republican Party in Florida to be the next governor.
Well, it would be
likely.
for a short time because they'll be
don't-
electing.
I was going to
new
say, I
governor
don't think Ken
in
Paxton,
months.
Ken Paxton, I don't think has the gravitas or the reputation to be Attorney General. I think that would be problematic. And when I look back at the first term of Trump, his DOJ was a disaster area. Trump never took control of DOJ during his first term. So I would hope that Todd Blanche, I think, does have the gravitas to do the job, and I think Eric Schmidt, as I said, former Attorney General of Missouri, who has been a pretty strong senator. I think those are the two big candidates.
Well, if I had a guess, I would say Blanche because he was the personal attorney for Donald Trump. So Trump has a lot of confidence, and he probably thinks he wants somebody more aggressive than Pam Bondi. And I think Todd Blanche might fit the bill, and yet be a calming influence and may get through a confirmation. So if I had a guess, I would say Todd Blanche.
Okay, let's move along to some issue that's not breaking overnight, and that's the funding of DHS, which the Democrats have been blocking because they don't want money to go to ICE. The president has signed this week an executive order, so the TSA agents finally are getting some money, but that's on a temporary basis with this executive order. The other thing the president did is he brought in ICE agents into our airports to move along these crowds that were, in some cases, waiting 3 or 4 hours to go through security. I've seen clips online where now the airports they're moving through as they should be with the help now of these ICE agents. Let's listen to a soundbite from House Speaker, I should say, Johnson, for what he said about a week ago when the Senate passed a bill that at that time the House Speaker did not like at all. Let's listen to what he had to say.
This is not a game. We are not playing their games. These people want open borders and they want criminal illegal aliens in the country. They do not want to enforce the law. They want to literally defund. You just read it in the bill here. They want to give $0 to enforcing federal immigration laws and keeping the border secure. That was the biggest issue in the election of 2024, the wide open border that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris hoisted upon the country. And 20 million, by some estimates, 20 million dangerous, criminal, illegal aliens included in that number came over the border. We have terrorists in our country. We have obviously murderers. They're putting it on display. And then these big blue cities that have sanctuary city policies, they're releasing these people onto the streets. They released them over the border when they came over under the Biden years. And that is the turmoil that we're facing right now, the very serious threats to the homeland and everybody.
So that was last week, Jeff. It's not quite the same this week. What do you have to say?
Well, in summary, what's going on now with the whole funding issue and the TSA and the airport congestion is this is getting solved. It's getting solved by a combination of the Senate bill that was passed that Mike Johnson and the president were not happy with using reconciliation because they left out ICE, they left out border control, they left Mike Johnson talking about bringing back open borders, bringing back a lot of the days of 10 to 20 million illegal immigrants coming across the border unvetted. Nobody wants that. So with reconciliation, you're able to get ICE.
And let me back it
ICE
up
funding.
a little bit, and not to say you're right, But I want to say where last week that bite, I brought it up in part because the House was rejecting the Senate bill. Now they're saying we'll go along with it because it funds things like the Coast Guard and TSA. And now, and then with what you're saying, the Republicans will do reconciliation, and that way they don't need to fund ICE. That way they don't need any Democrat votes, and that way they can get past the Democrat roadblock. But address this, Jeff. As we just heard with Mike Johnson's conversation goes, they want open borders, they want these people in, they want to have this. To what extent do you think, which to me this is showing the Democrats' game, that they don't want to fund ICE, and they were the party that didn't say anything about Biden's open borders. We see these murders happening. We see the crime happening around the state from these illegal aliens that have been brought in. What, if any, political punishment will the Democrats face as we go to the midterm elections, in your estimation, based upon their policies?
Look, the Republicans have to make the point. Republicans think this, but I don't know if they made the point. The reason why Democrats wanted open borders, that was because the blue states are losing population to the red states. That's clear. California, New York, Illinois. And when that happens, they're losing funding. People don't realize if you replace the lost population in those states with the new population of illegal immigrants, they count. They may not be citizens, but they count for apportionment. That is for how many Congress people they keep in their state, for the spending they receive from the federal government. They want illegal immigrants, even to the point of having them unvetted and the danger. And if the Republicans bring this to their attention, that is to the population's attention, to the citizens' attention, that affects the midterms, and that's the ball.
Well, you're right, and even more than the midterms. I mean, you go forward. Look at Illinois. Used to have 22 congressmen, and now they have 19, and I believe, then they're going to be going down. They keep losing.
They have 17.
17 now, right? So that goes to show you went from 22, as I said, 19. I thought, is that right? They went from 22 down to 17, and we keep losing. As you said, the blue states are losing.
Right.
That's why the Democrats under Biden, that's why the Democrats in the Senate and the House did not object to this coming in. But you can certainly make the case, if you're the Republican Party, that the Democrats are putting politics above national security and above the security of the American people. Let me play a bite here before we get too far away, because on the bill, on what we talked about here, where TSA has been funded on a temporary basis, and the need, the Republicans would say, to go to reconciliation. We had a question from a reporter at the White House press conference earlier this week where she said, if the president gave, as he did, an executive order to put money into to pay TSA agents, why then isn't that the end of it? And Carolyn Leavitt gave her response.
Of course, the president just can't keep signing presidential memorandums and proclamations every time Congress fails to do its job, and every time Democrats are holding our entire country hostage, picking and choosing which programs and agencies they want to fund just because they don't like this administration's policies. That's not how it's supposed to work. They voted 7 times against funding DHS over partisan and political reasons. And so, again, the president has stepped in to do the right thing at this moment in time. But the president is also encouraging Congress to come back to Washington to permanently fix this problem and to fund and reopen the Department of Homeland Security entirely.
So as Carolyn Leavitt said, you can't just have the President of the United States funding the government through executive orders on a permanent basis. This was an extreme measure by the president because he had hundreds of TSA agents who hadn't been paid in weeks, and they were falling behind, in some cases being evicted or from their apartments for non-payment. They had something like 400 TSA agents had left the job for not being paid. So, as she said, you can't have Congress refusing to fund departments of government because if you lose the election, then the people that win the election are going to have their policies in place. And if you don't like that, then win the next election. What's your response to what Carolyn's saying?
Well, you would like it if that were the case. Back in the olden days, 60, 70 years ago, how we won World War II. We had a functioning government. And so we had, even though there was a filibuster then, we still had people not playing games. Now they play games. The Democrats all the time, the major mainstream media all the time say, well, it's the Republicans. They're in control. They have the majority in the House. They have the majority in the Senate. They have the majority on the Supreme Court. Well, number one, they don't control the Supreme Court. That's not a legislative function. They may have influenced it when Trump appointed people, but we've seen that judiciary rules against the president often. But more importantly, with the filibuster, the majority in the Senate, if the Democratic Party wants to play games, if the Democratic Party wants to no longer has the policy that politics ends at shore end with respect to foreign policy, there is nothing where the country and the Congress and the government work together, even a war. That is where we are in this country. We need to return. We need to return to a regular order where the whole goal of the Democratic Party is not to be disruptive and to go attack Donald Trump. There needs to be some working together, some achieving things and moving.
Yeah, but that's not happening. In fact, earlier this week, what did we see? We saw Democrat supporters going out and holding their No Kings March. And it is ironic that the Democrats talk about a threat to democracy, and yet it is they who are blocking the policies of an elected president. As you were just saying, we used to, after someone won, they didn't go along with everything, but they kept the government functioning. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin was interviewed earlier this week and mentioned that of 22 different spending bills, the Congress had only passed like 6 of them. So we have a non-functioning government, basically, and this is why we're funding government, as we see, year after year, with the continuing resolutions. Basically, that's just a bill saying, continue the funding that we did before forward. But that is not how you should be doing it. As we mentioned earlier in the show, the Defense Department is going to need substantially more money, not the same money they had last year, because of the war in Iran and the money that was given under Biden to Ukraine. So it is a non-functional government, and it's something that really needs to change. And if the Democrats don't want to have kings, then maybe they should be participating in a bill and getting some cooperation and negotiating how to get things done rather than being obstinate.
Right. If they want to contend, as they do, that there's some reforms needed when ICE exercises its responsibilities and exercise its responsibilities to follow the law. If you want to get those reforms as they were on the way to do it, the Democrats, well, then don't decide you want everything and you then want to tell them no funding for ICE because it's not reformable. So we're just going to shut down the airports. We're just going to shut down the funding. We're just going to do what we want to do because that's the only thing we have. We don't have enough control. We didn't win the election. So that's what we're going to do. Their base wants them to shut down the government, shut down the country. Really, that's what their base wants. And Schumer wants to stay in his position. So he says, to hell with it. I'll do it my 20%, 25% base of the Democratic Party wants.
Jeff, we only have about a minute left. But the thing is, I would point out is, what are the Democrats focusing on to make America better? Where are their policy propositions for health care, for national defense, for creating more jobs, for any number of things? And where they are right now, and all we see coming from them, is fighting Trump. Orange man bad constitutes their entire domestic and foreign policies. And, you used to have people in the Congress, in both the House and the Senate, on the Democrat side of the aisle, who were really proposing ideas to fix problems. That's what, to me, the Democrats have to get back. We only have about 20 seconds. I'll give you the last word.
Compromise. There has to be some compromise by Democrats and Republicans for the public good.
Right. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, have a great Easter. Jeff and I will be back next week. Give us a thumbs up, leave your comments, and we'll talk to you.